Hey, we're here today at the Pocomoke River State Park, Shad Landing, to demonstrate the beginnings of a log canoe, dugout canoe. We're, as descendants of the Pocomoke Indian Nation, the tribe that inhabited this area historically, we are trying to understand the methods and practices of our ancestors by taking a hands-on approach and actually attempting to do the things using old skills that were done to survive in this area. And what we're here today to do is begin the process of burning out a log canoe. With me here today is my father and the chief of our tribe, Norris Howard. My name is Norris Howard Jr., otherwise known as Buddy, and we take an active interest in learning more about our family heritage. The log that we're burning today is a tulip poplar that was harvested from Milburn Landing State Park. The tree was cut by killed by lightning strike, and cut by the Park Service, brought here for our use in this display. This is an ongoing demonstration, not intended to be done all at one time, but will be, over the course of time, hopefully completed and fashioned into a working canoe. Canoes were made in this area historically out of a multitude of different trees, tulip poplar being one of them, but also white cedar and bald cypress were used, as well as pine. In essence, any tree that was of large enough diameter without many limbs for a long section was suitable for making a canoe. Traditionally, these canoes were described as taking approximately 2 moons to build or to burn, which in our modern day language would be approximately 2 months. And that process would begin by girdling a living tree and doing so in the off season, in the winter season, so that the bulk of the sap of the tree was down into the root system and would create ultimately a drier wood to work with. After the girdling was done, clay would be packed in and around the base of the tree. The same clay that we're using here today, which was literally dug out of the ground, about in the Chrisfield area where we're from, about a foot below the surface you'll find a layer of clay, and the clay is suitable for the purpose that we have here today, as well as pottery and other uses.
Before you get into telling them about the process, might be interesting to know what records do exist as far as burning the dugout in this area. There are the drawings that were produced, are done by John White back in the, I believe, the 16th century, late 16th century, and there were the engravings by Theodore de Bry that most historians rely upon as the way that the dugouts were fashioned. Buddy has said about where the tree came from, and of course, typically what the native people did was they would find a tree that was close to a watercourse so that they could work the tree and not have a problem with transporting it. So they like to build and transport such a large log as this. So that's how they would go about getting the tree. And of course they would actually burn the tree to fell it by use again of this sticky clay and combination of burning and chopping with axes or adzes or whatever tools they had. Once burned, they would then burn it off a section for what type purpose or what they were going to actually wind up using as a log to make the dugout. The last known that we know of recorded evidence of a local person that had a dugout was a Mr. John Lawson, which was written in his obituary in the Crisfield Times, which stated he had fashioned and had a dugout canoe. And that Mr. Lawson, I believe, passed away in the year 1917. So that's a little bit of the background of what the influence this local area had upon the manufacture of dugouts.
Okay, so with that history and with the technologies that were described in various historical documents, we are using those methods here today to begin this dugout canoe. We're letting fire, as you can see here on top of the log, we have created a layer of clay on each side of this log to contain our fire and to keep it focused into the center of the log. We are building a fire off to the right here to develop coals in. We can develop them much more readily, condensed down into a pile, and then transferring those coals to the log to get the log ignited. Now once the process of burning the log takes place, obviously the fire is going to do the initial work, and it's going to get into the wood of the log and degrade it, and it's going to be followed by a repetitive process of burning, wetting, and scraping. And the process of wetting burned sections of the log creates a charcoal effect. As that cold water goes down into the hot wood, it starts to split, crack, and cause the wood to create chunks of ash rather than simply a powdery ash. And this will allow us then to go in and take those areas out, excavate those areas in chunks rather than simply scraping away fine wood ash. Now this process of, you can see here this chunk of charcoal that has developed. As that water got down into the burning wood, it immediately cracked and broke that charcoal away. So it came off in a much larger, more productive way than simply burning it. The tool that's being used here is basically, for lack of a better word, a gouge. It's fashioned from a wood limb, tree limb, and the end cut down to create a sharp gouging edge. But the tool that will be used throughout this process, which is even more readily available, are shells. What's being shown here now is a clam shell, but clam shells as well as oyster shells. And in fact, on a personal level, I think oyster shells are a bit more effective because they have a more serrated edge. But the shell will then be used for the fine scraping and cutting away everything there that was burned so that we can start afresh and transfer fire now back to that spot. We also have a tool illustrated here, which is a combination of natural products. This is a wood handled tool, but it's been equipped with a stone point. This particular stone is referred to as greenstone, and it has been formed into a blade and mounted on this handle, creating an adze, what we would call an adze. It's mounted with rawhide lacing, which would be coated with pitch, pine pitch, or hide glue to tighten the lacing and make it a very effective cutting tool. But even so, the heavy lifting here, so to speak, of the process, excuse me, is being done with the fire. This particular adze, by the way, was fashioned, handcrafted by Daniel Abbott. Mr. Abbott is, Firehawk Abbott is affiliated currently with the Hansel Project and the Chacon Longhouse at Chacon. So we appreciate his willingness to loan us this tool for demonstration today. So this process is very repetitive. It's a communal process. It will result in a tool that will be used by the village as a whole. It will be crafted by the men and the women in the village. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of attention, but when you have a community effort, as with all projects, you tend to get a whole lot more done. So,
what I wanted to interject a little bit about how what size these dugouts were. Typically, they would be anywhere from 16 to 24 feet in length. They would probably be about a foot and a half, 2 feet wide. Those types of dugouts were generally referred to as P-Watsus. They would go as large as much as 50 foot long, according to the records that we had found, and carry as many as 40 people.
this particular example, I think, is probably this particular example is about 16 to 18 feet long, and will probably carry 3 to 4 people.